let's check in now with the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. It's time for our daily intelligence brief from my old colleague and our good friend, Pete Hoekstra. Pete, we welcome you back to America's Forum. Take us through the protocol and the practicality of this so-called apology from the White House to the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Well, I'll tell you, I got to believe that Mike Rogers, Dianne Feinstein, Saxby Chambliss, the leaders of the bipartisan leadership on the House and Senate Intelligence Committees have to be absolutely furious. 10 days ago, the White House releases inadvertently, they make a mistake by releasing the name of the chief of station in Afghanistan, the lead CIA person. This week, they're apologizing to the leaders of the Intel committees because it was an oversight. And so, the leaders of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees are now considered an oversight when there's a major foreign policy decision being made and they're not informed. JD, there's a very, very specific protocol that is used. It is used all the time. It's called, for something like this, it's called the Gang of Eight. The House and Senate leadership of the Intel committees, that's 4 people, and then the lead Republican and Democrat in the Senate and the House, they are informed of these kinds of major decisions that really need to be very narrowly held because you don't want any leaks, but they're advised of the decision, they're asked for feedback and input, and their analysis. Where do we use this? You may remember a number of years ago when there was a North Korean designed nuclear facility being built in Syria, and I think the Israelis took that facility out in August. We were notified, the Gang of Eight was notified 5-6 months before that and said, hey, there's a facility here. We think it's going to be used to perhaps produce nuclear grade material for a nuclear program in Syria or somewhere else. We're aware of it. We want to inform you of it. We're not telling anybody else. And before anything happens, we will notify the 8 of you as to whether there's going to be an action taken against it. 2 or 3 weeks before the Israelis supposedly took out this facility, Congress was informed. Before the 8 of us were informed and said there's going to be something that's going to happen over the next 2 or 3 weeks. We need to advise you, and we'd like to have your input. There is a protocol for these kinds of things. A
protocol in the process, and in that situation, Pete, we're talking about something of great import, possible nuclear materials, and we remember that as part of history. But I'm interested in what may be transpiring today. I can recall when we would have intelligence briefings on the House floor, we would go out of session, intelligence folks would come in and brief us as a body. If I'm not mistaken, the same thing is going to happen today on the floor of the Senate, where instead of the Gang of Eight, or perhaps because the Gang of Eight was not informed, I understand the administration is sending over intelligence officials to both apologize to the entire Senate and give them a briefing after the fact. How do you think that's going to sell in a bipartisan fashion?
I don't think it's going to sell at all, JD. I mean, number one, you've got they broke the protocol. They didn't even have the courtesy to tell Congress that they were going to do this. And now they're getting this huge backlash with bipartisan Republicans and Democrats saying that this is a terrible deal and that this jeopardizes the very security of American men and women who are still on the ground in Afghanistan. It's going to jeopardize this, Afghanistan, they're having an election on June 14th. There's going to be a new government installed. Hallelujah. It's going to be a peaceful transfer of power, from one administration to the next. And we're empowering the very people that want to overthrow what will be a newly elected government in Afghanistan. It's not going to go over very well at all.
Pete, we also want to talk about the fact that the Taliban 5 have unsupervised freedom of movement in Qatar. Can we really expect them to stay there a whole year?
No, I mean, JD and I talked about this a little bit yesterday. I was in an EU country when I was still in Congress that had received some of these prisoners from Gitmo, low-risk prisoners from Gitmo, and the agreement was going to be that they were going to stay in that country and that country they were going to stay there for at least a year. But the folks in the government there said, Pete, we don't have the resources to monitor them. We stop by maybe once every week to just see if they're there. But since in the EU you can cross borders freely without a passport, they said we really have no way of tracking. Now, when you're taking a look at these 5 folks in Taliban, they're going to have the same freedom of movement within the country, but they're also, I think, working with a government that's going to be more sympathetic to them. I think if these guys want to leave Qatar, they can do it very, very easily. They could be in Afghanistan, Pakistan in days and months if they wanted to be.
So while the Taliban 5 really received no supervision in Qatar, you have a situation where there seemed to be a very well orchestrated propaganda video of Bo Bergdahl being released into American custody. We've taken a look at some of it. We may take a look at some snippets again. But what interests me is, aside from Sergeant Bergdahl blinking quite a bit, all this talk of health problems, he doesn't appear to be unsteady. He, at least to my eye, doesn't look much worse for wear. Pete, have you seen the video? What is your take on the amount of video put out, and is this yet another propaganda coup for the Taliban and/or related organizations there in Afghanistan?
Well, here's what I'm hearing. Number one, I think the doctors at Langstuhl Air Force Base or the base in Germany have said that his health is stable, that there is not a health crisis associated with Bo. The second thing is my sources in the intelligence community, people who have either talked to or maybe have actually seen Bo, have told me that it didn't appear that there were any serious health problems, and that just verifies what you and I have both seen on the video. Bo is able to walk, from the Taliban into the arms of the American soldiers, who then help him and assist him to the helicopter and those types of things. And now there's a story out that says, what the Taliban did is they released a video back in December where they may have exaggerated and made him look in poor health to kind of, force the decision and force the Americans to the negotiating table and negotiate this deal. So maybe it's one more step in a successful propaganda ploy by the Taliban to get the kind of result they wanted. They got exactly what they wanted out of this deal. 5 of their senior leadership released from Gitmo for an American that they were ready to give back to the United States.
Pete, were there intelligence assessments of Bergdahl after his defection?
My understanding is that there were. I never had access to those, and my understanding is that they are still classified. And that assessment would be as to, what were the exact circumstances for, him leaving the base, what was his state of mind and condition before he was captured, and those kinds of things. So that my understanding, and I'm sure there would be an assessment. There'd be an after-action review. If we're losing an American soldier, you can bet that the military drilled down and got everything that they could to try to understand exactly what happened that night when he was captured.
Pete, in the last minute we have here, New York Times reporting that Bo Bergdahl left a note explaining his desertion before going AWOL. Do you expect, now we've heard calls, General Dempsey says the Army's going to review the case. His platoon mates say he ought to stand for a court-martial. Do you believe that might happen to Bo Bergdahl?
I think that there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure, especially when his colleagues in the military, the people that he was serving for, where they're calling for an investigation and where they're calling for some type of hearing. Hey, we lost a lot of men and women who gave their lives, who didn't leave their post. We owe it to all of the men and women that served in Afghanistan to make sure that the right thing happens here and we get to the bottom of it. Absolutely.
Pete, as always, we appreciate your analysis as part of our daily intelligence brief. And let's ask you at home, what do you make of Bo Bergdahl? Should he face a court-martial? Why don't you tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum. There's also email and Facebook.